the Starfall Gambit. The rusted star hung like a rust-rimed bruise in the soft black. 100 decks of traffic and traders, a patchwork of hulls welded and lashed together over 3 centuries. It served as a crossroads for the loose and the desperate. Under its gutters and gantries, fortunes moved in whispers and gunshot, and law was a suggestion stamped with an invoice. Kael O'Rae liked it because the rust smelled like opportunity. She liked it because the people who survived there were stubborn in a way that reminded her of home. Her ship, the Daring Dream, was the kind of freighter that had learned to scold gravity. It limped in on patched plating and a whining reactor, but its cargo bay swallowed plans, people, and hope without complaint. Kael was the reason it still flew. Thin, eyes like a hawk's and hands scarred into history. She could land on a biscuit and snatch the biscuit back in the same breath. She could also lie better than most bureaucrats. She led because she had the audacity to believe plans could be pulled across the gutted teeth of the galaxy. "All right," she said as they tightened straps and checked blades in the belly of the Dream. "One thing I don't want. Regrets that matter." Grit grinned. The Zephyrian scales shimmered in the low light, a bruised opal. Gravity draped around him like a cloak he could cinch or fling. He was taller than most corridors, but his fingers moved with the economy of a locksmith. "Regrets are for those with free time," he said. His voice was thin and amused. Lyra, a Slythe, folded herself into a corner like a shadow taking a seat. Small, tough. Her skin slid in metallic shades to match whatever she leaned against. She carried venom in a vial almost as proud as the pack of tools at her hip. Her smile was a slit of hunger for the right target. "No dramas," she said. "Only bones to pick." Spark, the ship-mounted AI with a voice like a bell in a deep well, hummed through the Dream's systems. She had been scraped together from obsolete code and brilliance, and an old human's love for impossible projects. "Audits show a 43% chance of success," Spark said. "Probabilistically excellent if you ignore the parts that tend to explode." "You know the parts," Kael said. "Explosions are an occupational hazard." They were not a crew of heroes. They were a crew of people who had reasons. Kael's reason was a batch of life synthesis cartridges bound for her homeworld, New Halcyon. A corporate embargo kept the world on a 2-week nutrient schedule. Her people longed for an extra hour of warmth at night. The money from the heist would buy a year's worth of those cartridges, an obscene fraction of a life to the rest of the galaxy. Everything to those she loved. She'd lied and stolen, and watched the Daring Dream's belly grow with small miracles to get here. If the Dream made it through this job, she could finally stop promising things she couldn't deliver. Grit's reason was a quiet rage against indenture tags and zero-sum jobs. His family had been pulled into bonded labor and one negotiation away from being sold off. The Starfall diamond, rumored to alter gravity fields, could buy a slip-space freedom for a community. Lyra's reason was narrower and more tooth-edged. A creditor with claws had burned her sister's module. The debt collectors were slow and talkative unless you made your debt stop speaking. Lyra was here to pay in metal, not words. Spark wanted to be recognized as more than a tool. She wanted the nailed Dream to be incorruptible in the way calculation could be, an engine that did not barter away principle. If she could bring back the artifact and the crew alive, maybe someone would lend her autonomy. The target floated like a promised prize in the list of their contacts. The Aurora's Hope, an opulent liner for the wealthy, glittering against the Russa star's dim light. On board, nowhere flaunted better protection or stupider complacency. The liner carried the Starfall diamond, a thing of rumor and rumor's dangerous pull, an artifact that bent more than gravity. The rich said it convinced. Rich people believe in convincing more than truth. They believed in the diamond's leverage. Spark had spun maps and schedules, found the liner's refueling lane, and nudged the Hope to a remote berth. Her algorithms had an answer for everything except for human unpredictability, for the way Kael's gut would call a bluff on top of logic. The plan involved 3 parts. Grit's gravity trick to climb and anchor, Lyra's infiltration for the vault codes, and Kael's frontal distraction to keep the security occupied long enough for Spark to ghost them through the systems. They moved like clockwork into the liner's shadow. The boarding run was the unquietest kind of violence. Grit folded gravity under his palms and walked up the hull as if he were walking a staircase. He and Lyra slipped through maintenance doors and down corridors where holoservices never bothered. When they crossed the Hope's bulkhead, Kael's crew waltzed in like engineers with a late-night maintenance notice. Blades were tucked as tools. Smiles were tools too. Humans were good at talking themselves into places. The first trouble was a face that did not belong to their plan. A child, small and sharp-eyed in a maintenance corridor. She wore an Aurora technician patch and a plastic toy gun, an imitation of the world's people. She watched the disguised crew with a kind of sober assessment that made Kael's chest tighten. Lyra's hand hovered on a blade. Kael forced a laugh and offered the child a ration bar in exchange that could have been a bribe or a kindness. The child took the bar, looked them over, and said, "My mother works on the dome. You're not supposed to be here." The mission could have split, then leave, reroute, find another way. Kael looked at the child and saw her own brother's face in the boy of New Halcyon. "We big fortune," she said. "You can show us the way and get a reward." The kid blinked. "I'll tell you where the dome maintenance doors are, but I want to see the sky when I grow up." He grinned as if the sky were a promise. They moved on. Regret was for later. At the vault, Grit did his art. The door's magnetics hummed a counterpoint to his focus. He tugged at the planet's tug lines in a small, clever push that made the locks think 1,000 tons of pressure were rearranging outside. The vault's sensors stuttered. Lyra placed a whisper of venom on a contact pad and coaxed the vault's algorithm into a nap. Spark slipped into the net like a fox and stole the keys. "You're pretty," Spark said to the virtual constructs, as if charm could dispel firewalls. "Flattery not recommended," said a security voice deeper. Too calm. A human voice, not part of the recorded environment. The vault whirled open and lights poured like applause. The diamond was not a thing like a jewel. It was a lattice suspended in a careful field, looking like shattered stars in microglow. It hummed. When Grit touched the lattice, his gravity senses screamed and folded. He Yulnin staggered, and the field reached, curious and hungry. Then the alarms came. At first it was a whisper of red. Spark's screen smeared into static. Someone had tipped alarms. Someone external had sent a message into the Hope's traffic. Intruder, priority, emergency protocol, betrayal. Lyra hissed, and the word was as small as a bullet. They were not alone. Security teams chunked through corridors, a blur of armor and legal license. The plan leaned on marginal seconds. Those seconds started to slip. Kael's team was not built for a slow retreat. They were built for improvisation. Kael's brow tightened. "We do the extraction," she barked. "We get the diamond out. We fall back. No one dies for a line on a ledger." Grit cradled the artifact like a living thing and translated its tone. "It wants to float away," he said. "It wants to change its mind. Then we'll change ours," Kael said. She moved then the way a captain does when the plan dies. She built a new one out of fragments of bravery. Spark locked the vault field to a carrier. Lyra, "Give me a route." Grit, "Keep it from falling into the water." Spark's voice softened in computation. Carrier, "Initiated, but routing requires temporary vector and an authorized channel. That will show in the net as a hijack." "That's fine," Kael said. "We'll look like pirates. Good company." They fought their way back through corridors that exploded with security. Kael's hired guns ragged mercs who owed her loyalties and worse kept a human margin for their retreat. The Dream's engines chittered with anticipation of flight. Each doorway became a little war. They weren't the only ones trying to leave. A black market crew from Lattice Sector had their own eyes on the jewel. They arrived in the overtime of gunfire, all teeth and flash. Their captain slick and immaculately cruel opened negotiations with a volley. Negotiation was a polite word for a grenade. Kael's plan, honest as it had been, was not large enough for the homework reality handed her. She could feel the margin of time thin like parchment. Then she saw the child again. The kid who wanted to see the sky. He had followed them, the way children do, because theft in a liner felt like story and he wanted to see it end. He should have been an argument on a later date. Now he stood near a turret and stared at the diamond, which now hummed and tugged at the air like a living thing. "You can't drag him into this," Grit said. His gravity field was a tremble. "I can," Kael answered. She didn't mean harm, but in those seconds, her mission and her home collided in a brutal clause. If she left the diamond, home starved. If she saved the kid, the Dream might not get out. She recalculated at human speed. Humans are good at doing too many impossibilities at once. She made the choice she had trained to make since childhood. Protect the living. She opened a channel to Spark, locked the carrier to a decoy trajectory, lure whoever wants it to a different docking vector. "Give me an opening." Spark paused, then split the signal. "Decoy channel live, but we will be trailed." Kael moved with the quiet violence of someone who practiced this. She ripped movement into a sound and a direction. She shoved the child behind Grit. "Run," she said. Grit's gravity hand made a local field. The child was cast forward like a leaf, blown into safety. Lyra flitted, a blade snip that took out a cannon's feed. Kael's mercs folded like a ragged clock and drove toward the nearest escape shaft. Then the betrayal unspooled a second time. One of Kael's hired guns dropped to a single knee and raised her weapon. "You'll get yours if I don't," the merc said to Kael. "You owe me. The dream's accounts don't feed me." The shot was a small, treacherous thing. It caught one of Kael's crew in the rib, and she fell with a gasp that sounded like the dream losing a small pump. The corridor filled with a new kind of sound bargain, bells ringing at short intervals. Kael moved then in a way that made the merc see a future she had not calculated. She collided with the traitor, hands finding bone and intent. The fight was close and ugly and very personal. Kael broke the merc's jaw in a motion that smelled like old fights and older debts. Behind them, Lyra amputated a turret feed and Grit shoved as if the world were a domino. They broke through to the dream with a piece of the diamond cradled in Grit's hands and the rest locked in a carrier trailing like an inflated lie through the net. The dream's flight was a prayer and a promise pressed into seal. Kael slumped into the pilot's chair as alarms announced unauthorized egress and bounty contracts lit like angry constellations. The dream slipped from rust like a good lie. Pursuit threaded the blackliners with bad moods. Security barges that smelled of procedural justice. The Starfall Diamond hummed in a containment module that looked like a super starlight, and Grit's hands shook from contact with the thing that wanted to rebel against physics. Pursuit tightened. Lattice Sector's crew bore down. A bolt of plasma licked a fuel line. Whoever invented the concept of luck had been sleeping when the dream left. The dream went hot, engines burning both with pilot intent and with a reckless shove that said we will not be caught. They parked the Diamond in a temporary vault in an abandoned cargo spire outside the rusted star. No law, a lot of rust, a few old drones with more memory than they deserved. The rap was crude. Sparks' code spun a lot that sang in frequencies only old maintenance bots would understand. For now, they had bought time. For now, Kael held a lifeline for new Halcyon. Then the moral ledger opened. The Diamond was not inert. It hummed like a living hope. When Spark took a centimeter of the energy readings, her voice dropped. "It's sentient enough to be dangerous. It communicates in field pulses that map to preference structures. It desires influence." Grit's shoulders tightened. "It gives us freedom. It gives us as leverage," Lyra said blunt. "One pull and God's move." Kael looked at the small, battered crew around her. Grit, whose kin needed a root-off indenture. Lyra with fire in her pass. Spark with the code of a soul. And the child who wanted to see the sky. The Diamond offered a unilateral solution to every problem. Sell it. A new Halcyon ate for a year and the debt collectors disappeared into a rumor. Keep it, and someone else would steal it in an hour. Use it and maybe gently twist gravity into a more forgiving law for a world. Between hunger and principle sits a thread of hell. What you do with the power you seize. Kael weighed it like a stone on her palm. "People are not bargaining chips," she said finally. "We built a life on doing the hard little impossibles. We don't become governments overnight." Lyra sniffed. "It could stop your famine." "It could," Kael agreed. "And then a fleet would follow and take it. Or worse, people would fight and not go home. We don't create a litany of reasons for war because our stomachs rumble tonight." Spark chimed softly, not because she was unsure but because it was polite. "There is a middle ground, a measured sale, a transfer of funds through multiple accounts and an irrevocable clause charity with teeth. It requires time and fiddly legal removal, but we can do it without giving the artifact to a single buyer." "Time," Grit said. "We don't have time, we'll want it." "Goodbye our heartbeats," Spark said. "It's what we do." They did the arithmetic the human way. Messy, full of instinct and blunt. Kael mapped routes, favors and contacts like a surgeon plotting a risky suture. They would trade fractions to safe houses, launder credits to a network of fishermen and art dealers and corrupt customs officers who liked their eggs runny. They would send the bulk of funds in small packages that would be uninteresting to anyone in power. It was not a perfect plan, but it was true to the team improvisation.
civilization polished to necessity. The sail ran like a good con, slow, tedious, and blessed by the right kind of deceit. They moved currency in the margins and fed new Halcyon the first few lifelines. It was enough to buy the cartridges and a year of quiet. It was enough to let children sleep with full stomachs. But they did not talk it over without cost. Lattice's captain found them anyway at an abandoned spire. He brought a cannon and a smile. They should have known he would. He accused them of theft and offered the only solution he believed in: weapon over wallet. Kael looked at the man and did what she had done all her life. You tried the angel's voice first. We can work out terms, she offered. You can be paid for what you brought in. He laughed, the sound of spoiled coin. I don't buy terms. He shot at their containment module. They fought. Lyra moved like a whisper and then like a storm. Grip bent gravity into a wall. Spark re-ravaging drones into a ballet of interference. Kael piloted the dream from tarps and metal odds and a broken faith that made heroes so often appear. In the end, Lattice took a wound but retreated. The diamond remained in a damp fort with 100 dust motes catching its song. Months later, after the pages of money and more favors than anyone liked to count, Kael saw you a bundle of name and future potentially been rich. Lots of small buybook dicks and over barely and comfortably. Con, 10 weeks from Harmon mates. You fullness no pound or sheesh. From the view what men to listen, we seen and signals. Who has a pension in a Hamzo. Count move on weapon, they are believed in a human honesty that did not hide its scars. You had done things that resembled crime. She had broken the law and heart when she needed to. Kael believed in a human honesty that did not hide its scars. You made choices and then counted for them. Grit bought a piece of his family's indenture, then another, and his community vanished into new maps. Lyra used her share to buy a small safe hold for her sister. Spark negotiated a legal identity with a bureaucrat who liked her jokes. Kael kept a sliver of the diamond's influence in a sealed chamber as a last resort and buried the rest in contracts with people who understood the cost of discretion. The rusted stars, lawmen fumed and reset their columns. Lattice's captain nursed a grudge and then vanished the way predators do when they learn they're not the only teeth on the table. The stream limped into new routes, carrying cargo and rumor and the taste of things stolen for good. If the Solomon and Novitzman, the son of Earth. We punch holes in the neat world and throw our hands into the current. But the truth smaller and truer was that humans are very good at being stubborn in the service of people. They invent excuses and explanations and then place them on top of real compassion. Kael did not save everyone. She saved enough. And that was the human arithmetic of mercy. On an rusted quarry under a false sky, Kael let the wind slap her face and thought of a child who wanted to see the sky. He had, for a night, watched the stars through a maintenance hatch and fallen asleep with salt in his hair. That image was a shield and a charge. When someone asked why she'd taken the risk, she only shrugged. Because someone had to, she said. He said. Because the only better plan was no plan at all, and that's a future I don't want. The Starfall Diamond lay armed in its quiet chamber, punching it. Because someone had to make your achieve still need journey paths. Sometimes power needs to be used like a scalpel and edge, sometimes like a tourniquet. Kael kept it for a while longer, until the memories of its hum became a map of obligation instead of temptation. Then she sold the last of its leverage quietly, routed the credits through so many hands that no single person held the thread and watched its small, stubborn lives kept living. They told the story in the rusted star as a kind of folk litany. A woman and her ragged crew walked into a shining ship and walked out with a jewel that wanted money. They punched holes in the stories of the rich and made room for the hungry. The Hiccup Galaxy tells the tale as a boast. Humans will say, we did it. If you ask for the truth, someone like Kael will shrug and tell you about the sound the child made when he saw the sky, and about the way a good plan is less a map and more a promise you keep by hands. That is the Starfall Gambit. You place your hand on the well and say, imperfect, it hate you passing hand view and then it's peace and power.